I'll leave now to the panel discussion, and I'll welcome here with me Dr. Rana and Dr. Ruqayyah. I'll start. Let's start by a round of introduction, and then we'll get into the questions and the discussion. I think at the same time we're leaving a space for questions from the attendees as well. I don't know how is this going to be collected. Where is Valia? Later.
At the end.
At the end.
Take questions.
Fine. We'll start with you, Dr. Ruqayyah.
My name is Ruqayyah. I work at 𝗵𝗵𝗁𝗁, the Children's Museum of Qatar, and my role is in digital and interactive museography, which for a lot of people, they always ask me, what is that? And it's the integration of technology into museum spaces. So any of you are here, I hope that you had potentially visited the National. I spoke to a few of you before. The integration of technology into museum spaces is something you see very prominently there, and that's a difficult way to do.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rana N Jawarneh. I'm Associate Professor of GIS and Remote Sensing at Qatar University. So I work in the academia and higher education. And I teach GIS and remote sensing in land use, land cover change, climate change, and also degradation and regulation and urbanization. So the use of technology in teaching and also spatial analysis is becoming also a very important to deal with land resources. So,
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll start with you, Dr. Rana. I think one of the biggest questions when we're talking about the impact of AI on learning in general, learning domain, is the speed of the change. And educational institutions are huge institution that has been there for a long history now. And AI is a new technology, and one of the things that everyone could be concerned about in the education domain of industry is that how fast can we move with these changes? For example, if you think of the curriculum cycle and updating a curriculum cycle, how can we, in the universities, for example, keep up with the speed of changes that are happening in the industries?
Well, thank you, Mr. Nasser, for this interesting question. And that's what we have been facing in academia and higher education. And Iman just mentioned that how the labor market and how AI changing the workforce and the labor market in a really very high rate that we need as educator in higher education, as a faculty member, to really adapt and integrate this fast growing into academia in ethical and in effective way. To be honest, if we are waiting to update the curriculum on the static cycle, that would be like at least we need to wait for 4 years at least for the first batch to graduate. But actually what Qatar University and other universities are doing now, they're trying to really make use of the AI workforce analytics or real-time data that we take from the labor markets to integrate these needs, and we need to see what the labor markets and the workforce needs and try to integrate at the micro level. So in doing that, we can modify the assignment and the assessment tool to really meet the needs or align with the needs of the workforce and the labor markets. But this, we are looking to really start changing that curriculum. As I mentioned, working step by step and making a good use of these analytics and AI sources data to really update the assessment tools and have these competences. Now we need to look to align between the student competences with the labor market is very important. And we need to look at the AI tools as supportive, as really tools that really make good graduates, that they are skilled enough to be competitive in the labor market. So we're working actually. Most of the universities are working hard, and now Purdue University are taking it as a proficiency. No one will graduate without proficiency in AI.
I see. Great. And I think one of the things that also we talked about is the flexibility in the curriculum as well, right? And then you told me this is already there somehow.
Sometimes it depends on the instructor, how they design their course. I mean, sometimes we have a set study plan. So you cannot really move a lot, but you can manipulate or you can do some changes with your course design where you really have some space for this integration and for this changes.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'll move to Dr. Ruqayyah and museums as well. But Dr. Ruqayyah, museums in general in this context is interesting to me because when we talk about AI, always we're talking about the context, right? And the importance of the context and so on. And museum brings that contextual, immersive experience. Another thing that also is interesting in the museum experience in the context of AI is how museums stimulate curiosity and make an open-ended questions for the people there. And this is something that AI brings as a risk as well. How do you see that, and what do you think the industries can learn from the museum's experience?
So I think earlier when you were introducing us, saying it's a good juxtaposition of formal academic institution versus informal institutions. Museums are research-based institutions, but they are informal educational institutions at the same time. So we're a tech conference, so I'll speak a bit of tech today. The research becomes data. Our data becomes insights, and our insights drive how we are developing experiences for who our audiences. So our people are always at the core of how we introduce technology, where we introduce technology, and all the use cases for technology. Does it work? Does it add value? And where it doesn't, we don't introduce it. So the beauty is always as well that we are working with real objects, real people, real stories, and we create memory, and people create memories. So I was at a conference a couple years ago, and they said a very interesting question. They said that AI is really good at answering questions, but humans are really good at asking them. And that answers your curiosity question. People come into museums and they ask questions. Who, what, how? And they're free to do so because it's an informal educational environment, but they're leaving with a lot of knowledge. And the knowledge that they leave with impacts and can very heavily impact formal educational environments. For example, within the National Museum, we have something called family exhibits. And in one of the family exhibits, after it was open, we'd quite often go and observe how are these interventions working for children and families. They're digital and they're interactive at the same time. There's one that speaks to life in the past. So children can go and it's a well, and it's a digital interactive, but they're engaging with, they get to pick, take a shower, take a bath, how much water do you use, or how much water would you use? And they have to sit there, pull that, there's a big screen, and they're pulling on the well, and they're trying to get to it, okay? Learning happened there, but how can that be enforced in formal educational environments? Let's say they have to go and they're doing a math problem on volume of water, or some sort of math problem, right? How are they supposed to understand what is a metric unit of water and what am I solving for? If they haven't experienced, okay, I use water for this and I use this much water for that, and this critical thinking happens naturally within museum spaces. And it allows for that type of exploration for learners to learn at their own pace, at their own time, and in their own way. And this is where we leverage technology. Where does technology add value, and where does it take away from the experience?
That's actually very good. And I'll build on that directly on the curiosity question, because I think one of the things that I think everyone is worried about, which is are we raising a generation where curiosity is being ignored, and then everyone is actually goes back to ask AI for everything. For one, my daughter is 5 years old, and you reminded me when we talked about the kids and so on, that at a certain point she told me, she asked me something and I told her, I don't know. and she said, "Can you ask ChatGPT?" That was harsh. In her eyes, I've always seen myself the one who's capable to answer everything. And this moment when she's asking about ChatGPT, I felt offended. How, enough about me, about the question itself. Curiosity, how are we defending curiosity? How are we defending the depth in the educational institutions versus the automation and quick answers and so on?
Well, thank you, Nasser, again for this question. It's a pretty big challenges, and we see this, and we teach this new generation. We do have hope, inshallah, and there will be a good generation, and inshallah, they will be a good asset, inshallah, in this country and all countries. As educators, that always when we design our learning outcome, our objectives of course, that we always follow what's called Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy. So everyone just talk, you have to use all these verbs in different, but now it's really interesting that also Bloom's taxonomy is evolving around AI and around technology. So now we have Bloom's taxonomy digital verbs that they focus on really fostering higher order thinking, analysis, creating. So now the good thing with these new verbs in different learning and cognitive thinking, that now they really encourage students for a high order, prestigious level of thinking and not looking at these AI tools as a shortcut of tasks. So in doing this, if you are really focusing on creating, analyzing, modeling the data and doing some simulation and really critical thinking, in this way you still need, and you still encourage them. You still motivate them for learning. So in doing this and applying this high order activity and thinking level, you can really encourage students and foster them to be effective learners, not just a dependent use of AI. So that's what we try. We always say, we always encourage, and we also do apply. We look for higher order level of thinking and apply for more students.
Brilliant. Back to you, Dr. 𝗵𝗽𝗏 and museums in general. In my mind, I think big part of why this region, and especially in the GCC, there is this big movement happening. I think one characteristics of it is and I'm reflecting here on the experience in Saudi and the experience in Qatar. There's always this cultural part behind it, and integrating it in the plans and on a national level and so on, and making sure that whatever we're doing is uniquely also linked to the culture and so on. And this has always made me think about the cultural spaces in general, including the museums, and how I think historically, for a certain area, was to some extent marginalized, and then there is a big effort to actually put it back on the center of what we're trying to do. How can we make sure that institutions like museums is part of the lifelong learning experience and whatever movement and transformation that is happening whether on a national level or on any level that you think is important?
I think the beauty of museums is that you go to museums at different moments in your life. You go as a child, you come back when you go on a school trip, you go with family, you go as an adult, you go with friends. And the types of experience that you can have in museums are so diverse. For example, if we, as this tech group, were to go to the museum, we would have conversations that are very different to a group that I would go with with a group of artists, a group of mathematicians. There's room for conversation and there's room for learning at every corner. The other thing is that museums inherently, everyone who works in museums, actually, we all are lifelong learners. We're all here at Web Summit today because we're looking for new things to learn. We're looking for new experiences and perspectives. In museums, we work in the same way. Every day and every exhibit you see is an outcome of researchers, curators, scientists, technologists, mathematicians, archaeologists, and the list go on, sitting together to say, how does this look for our visitors? What is the message we're trying to communicate? Is this something that's too technical? Do I need to step back? Does technology need to step back? What takes the forefront in this particular exhibit? So it's a practice that's practiced within the museum every single day at every single moment. It's a practice that we all practice every day. It's something that we just need to remind ourselves of. And technology doesn't take that away from us. And actually, we fall into the trap sometimes of using terminology like AI-driven world, or AI-driven this, or AI-driven that. And I remember when I was in university and we were doing our course planning, we were supposed to take a machine learning class, and the professor actually advised us, you know what, go to a neurolinguistic programming class before you do the machine learning class. And I'm like, why are we going to a psychology class before we go to a machine learning class, which is artificial intelligence? And he said to us, how are you going to train the machines if you don't know how we work? So this is the importance. The importance is it all comes back to humans. It all comes back to how we behave, how we learn, how we experience things. And as long as we continue to adjust the tone, one of the things actually I learned in that class was that our brain hears everything we say. So if we say AI-driven, it becomes AI-driven very fast, and we lose the reins. And we don't have to lose the reins. We can use terminology like AI-powered. This is powered by AI. This is AI supports the business and learning and whatever it is. But it's about taking back the reins and demystifying, and not always falling trapped using buzzwords around certain, around AI and other tech, but saying that, you know what, we know what it is, we know how we want to use it, just like we were showcased earlier with in the presentation. Here are use cases. This is how it adds value, and this is how it doesn't.
Very good, very good. And I'll break for the questions from the audience after this question. But I'll ask one final question, and I would like to hear an answer for the same question for both of you. And this is partially something was mentioned as well by 𝗵𝗵𝗁, which is the gap between learning and real-world performance, and how can we bridge that today?
How can we bridge that today? Like from my point of view as a faculty member or in the education and higher education, we are along with our students and the industry trying to really graduate those students with most of the capabilities or competencies that the industry needs. But however, to be honest, at the undergraduate level, you still cannot really grasp all these competencies and everything. So our life is always a journey of learning. And every time, every day, it's a new experience, it's a new day to learn more and more. So the way it always comes from the inside, to be honest. Whatever we try to really push and standardize and really use different approaches. And always I would advise always my students, you have to have this passion for learning all the time. Whatever we give you, we try our best, and we do push you for really the highest level we wanted you to do, but also you need it comes from the inside. You need our students, you need our graduates to be really passionate about learning. Because if they don't have this desire, they don't have this passion for learning, it is really hard sometimes to really flourish in the markets. They come with the minimum maybe competence and they're okay at the beginning, but it's always evolving. So they have to be passionate. They have to accept this dramatic and not dramatic, this dynamic environment and this really fast-growing learning environment.
I think it's something that is world debate right now. So World Economic Forum recently said that 65% of students in elementary school today will work in jobs that don't exist. And 𝗵𝗵𝗁 in her presentation was also referencing the same thing. Roles continue to change, jobs continue to change. So how do we prepare for this? UNESCO on the other side also is recently developing their digital and future literacies criteria, which also is trying to set guidelines or recommendations around how to prepare for a future that you don't know. but actually, we've always had to prepare for the future. We don't know. I always say this, although I'm in technology, I always say, at one point, the tools that were used to carve, beautiful patterns in gypsum was a technology. The paintbrush was considered a technology. Today, we have artists that are using data as their medium and algorithms as their tools and their canvases. So things will always continue to change, but what stays is what we call permanent skills. And what are permanent skills? Critical thinking, problem solving, systems thinking, responsible use, all of these core values that we always have had. Technology will always change, but these values need to stay. And actually, we were on site once with a group of archaeologists. And like I said, these interdisciplinary conversations that we have. And what's funny is we always say in our teams that let's try to speak the same language, because even if we're speaking, if it's Arabic, if it's English, whatever it is, we have to bring our expertise levels down to a commonality, right? So that we can develop the best that we can develop. So they were explaining to me, and they were like, actually, what we find in a dig and what we find on archaeology sites is what the people couldn't take with them. They took with them their most valuable things that they could carry, right? And I was thinking, okay, up until a couple of years ago, storage was something that was really problematic, right? We were always trying to clear out our phones. What do I keep? What do I delete? All of these. And we make these decisions every day when we talk about the integration of technologies that we're seeing here, when we talk about the companies that we're trying, what works for our business. It's a critical thinking process at any stage. We're always going to keep what is of most value and what is going to add value, or what I think will add value in the future. The way we think hasn't changed, the tools always will, and we have to just stay true to those core values.
Very good. I'll leave a room for the audience to ask questions. Is there a... Yeah. And then...
Thank you so much. This was a really enlightening discussion, and it resonated very strongly with what I'm building. So I'm a startup founder from Canada. I'm building Master Ed, a voice AI platform that commoditizes Socratic learning. So we help educators create agents that engage with students one-on-one to really get into the process of thinking, how they're approaching a situation or solving a problem. In many ways, diving into the Bloom's framework that you mentioned, how do we promote higher order learning? So my question is, do you feel that the best way to know if someone has learned something is to have them articulate it in their own words? Do you feel that is the most powerful way to both make the learning process more productive and also as educators to verify that people are actually learning?
Can you just... Well, Bloom's taxonomy, the learning, always the critical thinking, and really, so, but just the one part I didn't get clearly before, how we did.
Can you repeat the question?
Repeat at the end, just.
Right. So my hypothesis while building the product is that the best way to know that someone has learned something is to have them articulate it in their own words.
Their own words.
In their own words. So I was just wondering if this is something that you agree with as well.
Okay. This is pretty an interesting approach, but since you are building your own personalized learning stage, in this way you can address and you can really communicate with the learners in their own language, in their own words. Maybe they would understand it much better. However, when you come to a bigger groups where you have to address like many students in international environment, sometimes maybe in national environment where they have their own culture, their own learning language, that would be much easier. But in Canada, for in the US, all these campuses or these classrooms, you have to have more into like standard, I wouldn't say standard language of learning, but at least something suitable to really adjust for the differences or maybe the critical thinking or the understanding of the science or the discipline they are teaching. It is good to use the learner own language or way of thinking, that's when you have a platform at the personal level, maybe one-to-one learning platform. However, if from as a faculty member, when you have to deal with 70 or 80 students in a classroom, you have to come to a level you don't wanna. It is really to be aware of the language they like, and this is really engaging. Sometimes I don't really speak very standard Arabic language. Sometimes are very scientific, very deep. So I try to manage or balance the way that we don't lower the scientific value or the learning value, but at the same time, I have the student more engaged. They can understand, they can learn. In this way, and we have a more interactive learning process. That's my point.
Thank you so much. What I'm building is essentially an extension of you, agents that adapt to each learner and get better over time. So with every interaction, it logs, what that student likes, what are their preferences, what are their gaps.
So you adjust it to the
It's
preferences.
a self-learning agent. I do have one question for you.
That's cheating.
I have a question for you, Dr. 𝗪𝗵𝗁𝗁. I hope I got your name right. So you made a very interesting point about principal skills, like the core skills remain the same: critical thinking, systems thinking. What is your framework for evaluating these skills?
You mean in museums?
In general, like as an expert in human psychology or.
But can I just add to that? Because I think it's relevant since you asked two questions. I'll connect.
Go for it.
So just to connect to going back to your question as well as the nation building, the national values, I think that's what it's all linking to. When you're evaluating, what do you go back to?
When we're evaluating our criteria for how we are assessing these things, I just wanna, yes?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think the beauty of museums is that we're assessing through engagement. How are people engaging? How do people respond? Are people using these exhibits? Are people standing in front of these interactives? There are, certain practices that do pre and post surveys, but all of it maps back to national vision, big goals, all of these things. But generally, it goes back to, the beauty again goes back to when we do have personalized or adaptive type learning, it goes back to individual experiences, and it goes back to use. Again, how are people using things?
This gentleman here.
No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you pass the mic?
Thank you for this great topic. I'm a founder of one of Saudi's edtech startups that also focuses on personalized learning journeys, after-school support, and tutoring. I was very intrigued by what you said on the World Economic Forum, the metric 65%. I don't know if there's a time frame for that, or are they forecasting this for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But given what we do, we're always on the lookout of how to improve the personalized journeys for those students. And obviously the work that we do is heavily relies on what the ministry dictates in terms of curriculum, in terms of what schools offers, etc. I'm just wondering, for this specific metric, have we seen new best practices being adopted in the region to accommodate for this fact that you just stated? I mean, there's always a lot to learn from either Europe or the US or Southeast Asia on how to develop education, but not a lot of universal best practices that we see in our region. And I was just intrigued to ask, out of curiosity, if we have seen already in the last couple of years some new best practices emerging and surfacing to tackle this gap that we're going to be seeing in the short-coming future.
Maybe, yeah, joint, yeah,
Okay,
we can
go.
do it. Can you start?
I think again for curriculum and also for formal educational institutions, there are clear metrics that you can map against, right? There are curriculum standards, there are key outcomes, there are learning objectives, there are all of these things, and we have that in museums. I think for museums, it's more about how do people continue to engage with museum content? And for us, when we're looking at personalized, again, I don't like the word personalized so much, I like adaptive and responsive. But when we look at responsive technologies, it's that when people keep coming back, they're engaging with new content that they haven't potentially engaged with before. Still relevant to our exhibit, still relevant to our narratives and objects and everything. But it's new in a way, right? How do we keep getting people to come back into museum spaces, experience, dive deeper? So for us in museums, it's about layered information, and it's about making those layers accessible. Now, with regards to metrics, I'm going to leave it with my academic expert.
Thank you, Dr. 𝗵𝗽𝗶𝗍, and thank you for your question. But regarding how really the best practices are being adapted to really integrate AI with the real learning process, I think I heard the other day the Ministry of Education in Jordan, because I'm Jordanian, I'm really interested also in that. They built a platform for the student at the school level. I can't recall the name of this AI platform, where they need to start from the elementary school, where they can integrate the AI and ask each student to log in to this platform. I can't remember the name of that platform, and now I see lots of complaints from the parents. Well, some of the, I know we are like most of us as a parent, we need our kids and our children to really be exposed and really to be aware of these technologies and these advances in technologies. So pretty much, I'm sure, most of the ministries of education are taking this path. Now we need, because we are in higher education, now we're struggling, to be honest. We're still, because the generation that we have, they exposed to the AI and the advanced new technology in the later stages. But it is really good, it's becoming a fact. And as your son and as my son also asked me to ask ChatGPT about that, it's reality. And all these tools are reality, and it's part of our life. But it's really smart way really to practice and to integrate these tools at earlier stages in a professional way. So maybe
Thank
I
you.
addressed your
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I know it's a very engaging session. Unfortunately, we are running short of time. And I want to thank you, all the panelists, for keeping a very insightful and engaging session. And your practical perspective and experience truly enriched this session. And I want to thank you, Dr. Rana and Nasser. And we really thank you for this wonderful turnout. This really reinforces the confidence that we're doing the right things. So just before we leave, what we wanted to make sure is that we want you all to leave, we want you all to think differently about the future of enterprise learning. Because talent transformation and the learning must go hand in hand. Because in any organization, your real assets are the workforce. If you empower them with the actual skill taxonomies, you're able to capture them with the right tools and processes, you have an organization that is probably future ready or ahead of the future. Thank you, and thank you all for your time again.